Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to our distinguished guests joining from around the world. Welcome to the Think 20 Task Force for side event, Global Nutrition Challenges, addressing the triple burden of malnutrition through the G20. The side event is part of our task force on food security and sustainable agriculture. This webinar is hosted by the Center for Indonesian Policy Studies together with the World Food Program. My name is Felipa Amanta. I'm the head of research at Center for Indonesian Policy Studies, as well as one of the coordinators for Task Force 4 at T20 on food security and sustainable agriculture, and I will be today's moderator. Before we start our discussion, I would like to give the floor to our distinguished guest, to Dr. Donna Gultom, one of the co-chairs of the T20 Task Force 4, as well as CIPS board members to provide opening remarks. To Dr. Donna, the Zoom is yours.
Thank you, Pipa. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all participants, to all speakers and all audience. Greetings and distinguished guests. It is with great pleasure I welcome you to this webinar on global nutrition challenges, addressing the triple burden of malnutrition through G20. I'd like to extend my sincere appreciation to Krista Rader and the World Food Program team for co-hosting this event with the Center for Indonesian Policy Studies, CIPS. As the co-chair of the T20 Task Force and board members of CIPS, I would like to also warmly welcome our panelists. Welcome Dr. Saskia Depi, I wish I pronounce your name correct. Team lead analytics and science for food and nutrition at World Food Program, as well as the GRUD, sorry for not pronouncing well, Global Director Nutrition Advocacy at Unilevers. I look forward to hearing from your expertise and insights that will enrich this discussion today. This is a side event of the T20 Task Force 4 on food security and sustainable agriculture, where we hope to provide a platform for various stakeholders to discuss policy solutions addressing global nutrition challenges. Hundreds of millions of children under the age of 5 around the world are either stunted, wasted, or overweight. A significant portion of the global population continues to face hunger and malnutrition, where the unacceptable levels of malnutrition persist. Moreover, the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, conflict, and climate change exacerbate the factors contributing to global food security and nutrition challenges. As reported by the 2021 Global Nutrition Report, an estimated additional 155 million people are being pushed into extreme poverty globally. And as a result of the pandemic, people who are obese or have other diet-related chronic diseases are more vulnerable to COVID-19. This certainly adds to the challenge of meeting global nutrition targets. As a matter of fact, even before the COVID-19 pandemic, the world was already not on track to ending global hunger and malnutrition by 2030. As part of the global communities, G20 members must support the effort to provide essential food and nutrition for all. I hope today's discussion will generate feedback, analysis, and policy recommendation on affordable nutritious food and diets to be considered for inclusion in the joint communique of the 20. I believe today's discussion is a step forward towards enabling affordable nutritious food and diets for all, especially for children under 5, our future generation, that will bear the responsibility of bringing the world into a better welfare level, supported by a generation with better life quality. I wish both experts and audiences a fruitful discussion today, and I look forward to the thoughtful recommendations to shape our communique on food security and sustainable agriculture. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Donna. And today's event would not be possible without the great cooperation and support from the World Food Program. And I would now like to welcome Dr. Krista Rader as the representative of World Food Program in Indonesia to provide opening remarks. Dr. Krista, the Zoom is yours.
Thank you, Philippa, and thank you, Dr. Donna, for your warm words. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you all are. I'm pleased to welcome you all on behalf of the World Food Programme in Indonesia to this G20 Task Force 4 event on food security and sustainable agriculture, for which we join the Center for Indonesian Policy Studies. WFP's global focus is on reaching Sustainable Development Goal 2, or Zero Hunger. We are engaged in saving lives in the crisis regions of this world and changing lives and building resilience in more stable settings. WFP has long-standing partnerships with think tanks and academia, which have expertise in a range of subjects related to food security and nutrition. Such collaborations offer a unique platform to access and exchange evidence and arguments for our policy engagements. In today's event, we will discuss from a global and an Indonesian perspective, policy solutions to global nutrition challenges, with the aim of providing recommendations for a food systems transformation towards affordable, healthy diets for all citizens, which can be included in the joint communique of the G20. Today's nutrition challenges in G20 countries, be they middle income like Indonesia or high income, have become increasingly similar. We are all in the same boat. Most middle income countries still have high rates of stunting and wasting. However, the rates of overweight and obesity are rising rapidly in both middle income and advanced economies alike. And the rates of micronutrient deficiencies are high, especially in critical stages of the life cycle of women and girls. Poorer sections of society who have been affected most by the COVID-19 pandemic cannot afford and do not consume diversified healthy diets. These are diets with sufficiently large and frequent portions of fruit and vegetables, as well as animal source food. Their diets largely consist of staple foods, providing primarily carbohydrates. In more recent years, ultra-processed foods have become highly popular. Often inexpensive, these are detrimental to health with long-term consequences on the prevalence of non-communicable diseases. Clearly, also a productivity and financial burden for the economies. At the Food Systems Summit of 2021 last year and related national and local dialogues, as they pointed out, food systems transformations need to take place with locally suitable, diversified smallholder production for sale and own consumption, offering a future to farmers as well as a source of healthy diets. Food supply chains need to be made more efficient, and a variety of healthy foods, especially fruit and vegetables, need to be made available to the consumers at affordable prices. It is generally not the lack of food overall that troubles populations in G20 countries. It is the lack of affordable, nutritious food which affects them. People's purchasing power and the cost of healthy foods need to be more in sync. Import restrictions which aim to protect local production may need to be reconsidered in the interest of lower consumer prices. And for those sections of society which lack purchasing power, social protection transfers need to kick in at sufficiently high levels. If transfers are in kind or through vouchers, as in Indonesia's Sembako program, then micronutrient fortified staple foods can play an important role for the nutritional status of the recipient's household members. In addition, starting in childhood, all the way up through the formative years of schooling to adulthood, citizens need to become more aware of the importance of healthy diets and need to be enabled to make informed choices. This calls for appropriate maternal and child care and nutrition in the first 1,000 days of life, with a focus on preventing stunting, and continues with pursuing healthy lifestyles throughout the life cycle, including the consumption of healthy diets. Governments need to provide the required legislative frameworks and incentives for a food systems transformation. And the private sector needs to play its part in providing solutions with the type of food that is produced, processed, marketed, and sold, and the information it provides to the customers. Among the G20 countries, there are certainly good examples to be shared. We now look forward to hearing the views of the two experts. Thank you and welcome again.
Thank you, Dr. Krista, for the warm and very eye-opening remarks. And so as Dr. Donna and Dr. Krista have highlighted the scale and the severity of the global nutrition challenges and the urgent need to find solutions, particularly relating to food systems transformation to provide affordable, healthy diets for all. Yet finding a solution we know is not easy and requires cooperation from global leaders, policymakers, development agencies, civil society, think tanks and academics, and businesses. And that's what the G20 platform, as well as its accompanying engagement groups, are providing this platform. And to that end, today we are joined by a group of wonderful experts representing different stakeholder groups to discuss this matter and also possible solutions to tackle the nutrition challenges. We are honored to have with us today Dr. Saskia De P, Team Lead Analytics and Science for Food and Nutrition at the World Food Programme. And we also have Dr. Els de Groen, Global Director Nutrition Advocacy from Unilever. Each of our experts will have approximately 10 minutes for a presentation today. And then afterwards, we will open the space for discussion with our workshop participants. So I would like to invite all of our audience today to post your questions at any point during the discussion in the chat box, so we can raise them during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Again, feel free to post your questions or comments in the chat box at any point, and then we'll take them. All right, so without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Saskia De P to start our discussion. Saskia, the Zoom is yours.
Thank you very much, Felipa. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, good evening. Very pleased to be here and to share with you an overview of looking at consumer access to healthy diets, basically. Let me share my screen. Yeah. Should be able to see it. Let me know if not. So I would really like to discuss how food systems transformation, how to think about that, and how to identify good pathways for that that fit the context in the country. So we'll first look at some malnutrition numbers globally. So this is from the Global Nutrition Report from last year. We're really looking at malnutrition, many different forms. So looking at both undernutrition, micronutrient deficiencies, and overweight and obesity. So as you can see here, like a third of the global population is affected by overweight. It's actually 40% of the global population. And obesity affecting 772 million adults. The targets for reducing malnutrition are also reviewed. And you see here that for many of the targets, globally, we are off track. So childhood stunting, which is really an indicator for the potential of children to reach their potential in life with regard to health, development, income earning, that's off track. So there's, in orange, some number of countries not making progress or worsening, and the countries with some progress, and then a number of countries that are on course. And also some countries not reporting data on stunting. Anemia, very much off track, much too high, still not declining. Low birth weight, really indicating inadequate maternal nutrition, and also early pregnancies, so during adolescence, also a high risk factor for low birth weight, also off track. Childhood overweight, which is really about limiting very much that prevalence increasing. A number of countries on course, but many off track as well. Good news for exclusive breastfeeding, that's moving in the right direction, and childhood wasting is also persistent, so it's hard to drive that down. And also looking at other dietary causes, so these are not World Health Assembly targets, but these are targets or indicators that really link to non-communicable diseases, so stroke, diabetes, certain cancers, very much off track. And this really relates to consumption of foods that are not healthy, but it also links to a higher risk amongst people who are undernourished early in life. Many of these outcomes of malnutrition relate to diets, diets not being healthy enough. And here I'm just pulling one statistic on the intake of fruits and vegetables. You can see worldwide, it's only like half of the amount that is recommended. And this doesn't only indicate consumer choice, it also indicates what is available through the food system. So it's both supply and demand being lower than what's good for health. So when we look at nutrition and health, and we look at diets, we need to look at what can consumers access, what is in their food environment, whether we're talking a rural area and self-production, or we're looking at an urban area and what's available in supermarkets, in fresh markets, and so forth. It's really about understanding that and understanding whether consumers can access that. So is it physically around, and can they economically afford those foods? And then if those conditions are met, are they choosing that? There's been a lot of emphasis on choices, but we're really realizing that sometimes people don't have much to choose. So that's also where affordability or unaffordability comes in. The SOFI report, so the State of Food Insecurity and Malnutrition Worldwide, an annual report from the UN agencies, from 2020 really focused on affordability of diets, and it found that 3 billion people could not afford the lowest cost healthy diet. So it's a really big problem worldwide. The team that I lead at the World Food Programme, we assess non-affordability in countries, and this is a graph from that same SOFI report, And you can see we do this at a national and subnational level, that the range is wide within countries of the proportion of people in different geographic or administrative areas who cannot afford the lowest possible cost nutrient adequate diet. So it's a problem, as you can see, in many countries, and it really varies. It also varies by target group. So is it a young child? Is this a girl like 15 years old? Is it an older man? That is also really different. So it's an indication of risk of not meeting nutritional requirements at a population level, but also at a target group specific level. So what does it mean? And I'm now showing a graph from an analysis that we did related to the COVID pandemic, because we wanted to see to what extent unaffordability worsened because of the pandemic. And here we did not only look at what proportion cannot afford a healthy diet, but also to what extent can they not afford it? Do they miss here in the top orange band, do they miss the last 25% of the cost of a healthy diet? Or can they not even afford 25% of the cost of a healthy diet? You know, how big is that gap of unaffordability? And we saw with COVID that the proportion that could not afford the low 25% or 50% of the cost of a healthy diet, that increased. So that means some people don't even have enough money to have enough food, and many will have too low quality of the diet, and hence high risk of malnutrition. So in a country, looking at the food systems, how do you prepare a trajectory to improve that? So the first question is, what is the health and nutrition situation? Are we dealing primarily with undernutrition, and is overweight and obesity still low? Or is it really overweight and obesity that's high, together with micronutrient deficiencies? And related to that, in what way are current diets unhealthy, not meeting needs of the population? Is it basically very low diversity and not having enough to eat? Or is it there is enough, but there's too much of unhealthy foods in the diet, and does that really need to shift? So what is the starting point? And then also, because we want diets to be healthy for people and for planet, we need to know what's the environmental footprint of the diet, and also in what way are they climate resilient, and how can food production be more environmentally friendly. And then based on such an analysis, we should set targets for the long term and identify a trajectory to get there, which is really balancing supply and demand, pushing demand and ensuring supply is there, and the other way around. So here's an analysis that we did for Indonesia, and we looked at different dietary scenarios. So we looked at the current diet, and this is based on FAO food balance sheets. So it's actually what foods are in the food supply. It's not really the diet, because we didn't have good data on diet. So we adjusted that to have a similar caloric amount as our different scenarios, because this is an overestimate. And then we put two diets that meet nutritional needs at the lowest possible cost. We put the planetary health diet from the Eat Lancet that I hope several of you have seen. And we adapted the current diet to say, let's exclude dairy because of lactose intolerance. That's a pattern people may adapt to in Indonesia. A diet that does not have red meat. It has fish and poultry as animal source foods. And a low food chain diet. So this has sardines, ikan teri, tempe, tahu, So really more animal friendly and also a lower cost diet. And for those, we looked at nutritional value, we looked at greenhouse gas emissions, and that's what I'll show you on the next slide. But I also want you to see here that the diet that meets nutrient needs at the lowest possible cost, as well as the Eat Lancet diet, look how small the share of rice is compared to the current diet. So these would also involve major dietary changes. So for these diets, we compared how they each scored on environmental targets. So the higher the line on the axis, the better for environmental targets, for the cost, and for the nutritional value. And you see that there's no diet that goes across the top. So none of the diets was ideal for all those different parameters. And we also found that in this case, the Eat Lancet diet, it actually did not score very well on the greenhouse gas targets. Of course, much better than in high income countries, but not better than Indonesia's current diet. So it basically tells us that we need to be very creative and dig deeper to arrive at dietary scenarios that are good for the different outcomes that we value. So I just want to show you this center here. So what type of interventions are required that should we think about for transforming food systems? If we start at the lower right here, we need an increased availability and lower prices of nutritious foods, so they are easier to access for consumers. Then we should also increase the nutrient content of foods, and this is where, for example, fortification comes in. And then for affordability, we need to increase household income and food expenditure. So this is where, for example, a social protection program comes in, but also livelihood assistance and interventions related to livestock and fishery and agricultural practices. And we can also think about agricultural subsidy schemes, for example. So how do you allocate fiscal resources? And then, because different groups across the life cycle have different needs, this may also need to be topped up with specific interventions for specific target groups. So from that, you can tell that basically we need interventions across different sectors, because the ones that I showed you, we can understand how they impact access to more nutritious diets, and they require action from different sectors. So to conclude, for trajectories for food system transformation, and based on primarily the specific results I showed you for Indonesia, an important part, and this I showed you for many more countries, is reducing non-affordability. So it is about lowering prices and higher incomes. It's across those quadrants that I just showed, so that there's more choice options for consumers. Then for the consumers that have more choice options, we need to nudge them to make healthier choices. It must become natural to make such a choice. They must like to do that once they are enabled to do that. And to stimulate supply of more nutritious and healthy foods, we can leverage institutional demand. So here, talking about like the Sembako program, if the Sembako program includes fortified rice, for example, that is a stimulus to increase that supply of fortified rice. Same for the eggs in the program, for vegetables. Many countries have school feeding programs, so that's another form of institutional demand that can be leveraged to stimulate the supply side. On animal source foods, they have a higher greenhouse gas footprint. So there it's important that consumption doesn't go up to too high levels collectively, so that moderate amounts are consumed, and especially in the life cycle where they're most necessary. So making a choice for animal source food with a lower emission and limiting the amount consumed. Production methods, more things can be reached by selecting more climate and environmentally friendly methods. And of course, fortification is also a good way to ensure there's adequate nutrients and also to limit the consumption of foods with higher emissions. So with that, I thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions. Back over to you, Philippa.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saskia, for that extensive look at the current global nutrition challenges with a particular case study or look into Indonesia. So let's move on to the private sector perspective as a significant player in providing solutions and innovations as well for this. And today we also have with us Dr. Els de Groen from Unilevers. So the Zoom is yours, Dr. Els.
Thank you, Philippa, and thank you very much for inviting me to give some perspective on how the private sector can have an influence on transforming the food system. I'm Els de Groen, Global Nutrition Director in Unilever, and behind me you see our Foods Innovation Center, where I'm based in the Netherlands. I'll share my slides now. So, is it working?
Yes.
Okay.
You can put it on present.
Yes, I tried to do that. Yes, okay. So also for those of you who are not familiar with Unilever, it's a big food and beverage manufacturer. We operate in around 190 countries, and more than 3 billion people use our products every day. We sell products in food and beverage, but also in home care and personal care. So through our reach, we can really have an impact on public health. And as described already by Saskia, and the environment in which we operate, a fragile food system where we observe obesity, hunger, climate change, and food waste. And COVID pandemic has only increased this. And we in Unilever are very committed to help transform this food system. So for the rest of what I will be presenting is, of course, on how we address, help to address malnutrition. What important is for a food and beverage manufacturer is that the consumer is at the center of everything we do. Because we look at it from nutrition as a very, the details, the nutrients in the products, but of course, food is something that's embedded in our culture, in our rituals. It gives a lot of pleasure, and it provides indeed nutrition. And the ask of consumers towards more healthier products has increased over the years. And the recent COVID pandemic has only accelerated that ask. So we invest quite a lot of effort in understanding the consumer, how we can bring them along in more healthier options, in choosing more healthier options. But also their taste preferences and so forth, because if it's not tasty, the consumer will not buy it. We have a strong strategy. This is a very full slide, I realized, but it's our compass strategy of how we want to improve the health of the planet, health of people, and contribute to a fairer and more socially inclusive world. It is a business strategy. It's not a sustainability strategy as such, because we find it very important that all the actions we take in this are embedded in everyday business. We launched this Compass strategy at the end of 2020, and it's building upon 10 years of Unilevers Sustainable Living Plan that we started in 2010. And also in that plan, nutrition had a very prominent role. And but we focused during these 10 years really on improving the nutritional quality of our products by reducing salt, sugar, calories, saturated fats. What we do now is more looking into improving the further nutritional quality. So driving the plant-based agenda by offering meat alternatives and dairy alternatives, because that fits very well with our portfolio. We want to double the number of our products that we sell that deliver positive nutrition by 2025. And what do we mean with positive nutrition? It's more fruit and vegetables in our products, more whole grains, healthy oils, and also vitamins and minerals, either naturally present through ingredients or through fortification. And we want to increase the number or the portfolio that meets our WHO aligned nutritional standards to 70%. Now, what is that? The WHO aligned nutritional standards. That's our own nutrition profiling model that we developed back in 2003, but it served in the last 10 years during Unilevers Sustainable Living Plan to increase the part of the portfolio that meet these limits on salt, sugar, and calories from 30% to 61%. So that was really an enormous effort and a lot of investment in new technologies, and also learning from how you take the consumer along in this journey and how you make mistakes and learn from it. Now, this is how we perform today, and I'm not going to go through these numbers, but important to mention here is that our we report annually to bring transparency externally. We do this on externally assured third-party audited data. And important to know is that all our targets, all our commitments in nutrition apply to all our products worldwide. So in every country, under every brand, the product is in scope. Now, besides evaluating or improving the nutritional quality of our products, it's of course very important how we bring them to the market. So we commit to responsible marketing principles that we have installed in 2003 and regularly updated. And the last update was from last year, October, where we commit that we will not do any marketing activities to children below 13 years of age. And finally, the last point on this is bring transparency to consumers so they can make informed choices. It's not everywhere regulated to label products with nutritional information, but we commit to do that everywhere around the world, and nearly 100% of our packs carry nutrition information. That has not gone unnoticed by assessors like Access to Nutrition Index, where we score very high. And of course, we're very proud of that, but there's no way of being complacent, and we want to move on. Now, to bring it a bit further alive, what kind of products do we talk about? And that's actually from very nutritious, healthy products, fortified bouillons that help people really meet their iron, in this case, iron and iodine needs, meat replacers, more modern more recent acquisitions, but also dairy alternatives for regular ice creams, really to drive that environmental impact. And we will not say that a Magnum is a healthy product to eat every day, but we also have, of course, healthier products in the indulgent segment, in the treat segment. Another lever that we have, because we sell products, but we also inspire people for more nutritious cooking. A lot of our products are helpers in providing meals. So You see there a Knorr bouillon cube. We have a lot of seasoning mixes and so on to enable people to cook more nutritious. So a program that I want to highlight is our Future Foods program that was launched in 2019. It is an assessment of 50 foods around the world that are accessible, affordable, have a low environmental impact, are tasty, and have a good nutrient density. And we champion recipes with these ingredients that are better for people and for the planet. And more we use these ingredients also in our own products. We developed and validate this with internal and external experts, as you can see below. And we launched it in 2019 with a report and started working with it. In 2020, we launched a cookbook that you can download for free online. And if you want to have a hard copy, it's at WWF in the UK. We work a lot with our own recipes, but also with chefs to inspire them to work with these ingredients. Because these ingredients, if the demand for these ingredients will increase, it increases biodiversity locally and really helps to improve the environmental impact of the planet as well. In 2021, we launched the Eat for Good Day in February, and we use that day now every year to activate the importance of healthy eating. Now, we have many healthy eating campaigns and programs around the world. As you can see, I just listed a number of them in the different continents. And of course, they have different emphasis, but they are all based on the same principles. And it starts with identifying the local nutrition need that needs to be addressed. And often affordability and accessibility is also part of that equation. Then we work together with governments, governmental organizations, NGOs, academia, and local communities to make it happen. And we bring in our products with our brands that are trusted by consumers. And that also plays a very important role because our brands are trusted because of the continuous quality and the food safety issue of the food safety that they provide. Now, I'm not going to go through all these programs, but often it can be around malnutrition, micronutrient deficiencies, stunting, but also the lack of dietary diversity, the lack of consumption of vegetables. And one program I want to highlight, and that's the program that we run in Indonesia, and that's designed around the healthy eating plate of Indonesia. And the health issue that we identified was, of course, stunting, which is still a large problem in Indonesia among children. And we want to help mothers to cook more nutritious according to the Indonesian healthy eating plate, using nutritious ingredients and using seasonings that we provide with iodized salt. So the program runs as a 3-week program where we offer different recipes. And these recipes have been designed, have been created by chefs and by nutritionists to ensure the nutritional quality, but also the taste. If children don't want to eat it, it's also a problem. So the taste, the quality, and the affordability. And we partnered, as you can see, with many NGOs in this space, also to initiate an education campaign around the causes and consequences of iodine deficiency. Now, the program itself Together with the IBB University, we did a study in Garut, and it was shown that 75% of the participants of this program was able, the women that participated were able to cook in an affordable way according to the healthy eating plate of Indonesia. So that's really a very good, good reach. We want to reach this year 100 million plates with this program. Last year we reached 80 million. So in this, we will always want to improve in how we reach and educate and nudge people towards healthier diets.
Dr. Els, we're almost running out of time. So if you, perfect. The summary.
This is the summary. So,
great. Perfect timing.
So yeah, I hope I've given you a flavor of how a food industry can contribute to helping consumers towards healthier diets through strong time-bound targets to improve the nutritional quality of our products, but also by providing transparency and responsible marketing practices. We do this via products and via nutritious cooking campaigns, but it's very essential to partner for impact. So thank you for listening to me. I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. El. Sorry for interrupting, but we do want to leave time for a question and answer. So thank you so much for sharing the private sector perspective and also initiative to make sure there's healthy diets that are accessible and affordable. And we want to open it to question and answer now. Again, as a reminder to our audience today, feel free to please post your questions in the chat box and I will raise them to our experts. And we already have one from Mary Lianita from Bali. This question goes to Dr. Saskia about addressing cultural barriers that may exist in terms of food and consumer choice and diets. So the question is taking an example in Bali where fruit consumption is also low due to feeding practice related to cultural backgrounds. So how do you see this cultural aspect and how do you suggest any solutions or ways to deal with, to address the cultural issues? To Dr. Saskia?
Yeah, thank you very much, Felipa, and thank you very much for the question, Mary. Yeah, changing consumer practices really takes understanding the practice. So what is it driven by? And how could it be directed in another direction? I think the examples that Els showed also nice ones in the sense that, yeah, you need to understand the realities and how to create a shift. And when we talk about changing dietary practices, we often hear about social and behavior change communication. It's really to be a strategy, and that strategy should involve not only, so to say, the consumer, but also the retailer, also those that plan school meals. So it must be kind of targeting society wide. So if it's really a financial issue, then that is good to understand. If it's like a prohibition situation, that's very different. So kind of understanding what the openings are to go towards change and how to make it part of a true strategy. Like the example of a cookbook, of a YouTube class with cooks, with chefs that are people aspire to. It's also including those kind of things, and we call it sort of nudging. Don't just say this is what you should do, but hey, look how nice this is. Maybe you want to try it. Yeah. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Saskia. While we wait for other questions, I have some questions I also want to pose, and I think I'm drawing from the presentation of Dr. Saskia with that really nice graph about how the different diets score differently across the multifunctional goals of environments, of cost, of nutrition. And I also see that theme again being brought in Elle's presentation when you are showing how Unilever is committed to not just delivering positive nutrition, but also on the environmental impacts and other things. And so how should we address the potential trade-offs, and how can we ensure we can deliver on all of the different goals that might be a bit of a trade-off? So maybe I'll ask this to Dr. Els.
Yeah, if we knew that answer. So thank you for the question. It is indeed for now we still treat it a bit as separate entities, but really integrating what is good for health and for the planet is the crux, and that needs really local adaptation also. Or local insights, as Saskia has shown, because the E-Lancet diet is a global direction, but doesn't work for every country. You know, that is clearly the way. What is a hurdle in this is if I speak for us, as private industry, we really would like to know all these metrics for every individual product. Well, for nutrition, that's not so difficult because we know what's in our products. But to really know what the environmental impact is of an individual product is extremely difficult, and that data is simply not there. So looking at how can we make it, we haven't solved it either, you know. So we're working together with a number of initiatives that look at bringing all these data together and having a sort of overall or an assessment per product, but it's really something in development.
Thank you, Dr. Els. And there's more questions here. I will pick up from the chat box from Jesus Fernandez. Questions to Ms. Els again. Considering that most malnutrition problems are prevalent among school-aged children and adolescents of the population, how does your strategy directly involve them? And do you have other school-based nutrition promotion programs, for example?
It's quite a yes, and let me explain. We have a consumer-facing brands, that's what you all see. We also have a food service business, and that is largely engaging with schools as well on what can be for school programs. Actually, having private sector school programs is quite a sensitive topic, to be honest. We have had them really quite extensively when we still had a spreads business, where we educated children on the importance of breakfast and so on. We still do wherever, but it's really a topic that cannot be or a way of educating that cannot be done everywhere in the world, because simply private sector is not allowed in school. So that is also something you have to take into account. But definitely where we see opportunities, and always in collaboration with the school authorities and with local governments or ministries of education, that's always in collaboration.
Thank you. And we're picking also questions from YouTube. And this one is from CC, I think from YouTube. Dr. Saskia mentioned cooking demo and YouTube videos of recipes and everything. So the question I'll pose to Dr. Saskia and also maybe Dr. Els, if you have experience from your programs, about how effective is it? How effective is cooking demo to introduce local food? And do people actually change and start cooking because of this cooking demo, if you have any information on that?
Now, I must say I don't have specific information, or I haven't seen evaluations of that as such, but we do know that dietary practices change. If you look at what was consumed 10 or 20 years ago in my own country, in the Netherlands, but also in many other countries, we definitely see a shift. So I would say, yeah, there will be an impact, and you need to do it in creative ways, and maybe from sort of numbers viewing, we can at least see the potential that it could contribute.
Yeah, if I can build on that, we know that more and more people are very interested in recipes. I mean, it's one of the most searched words on recipes and recipe inspiration. And it's not only by YouTube or whatever, but also very simple on back of pack. You know, so if you have room on the pack, of course, as manufacturer, but a very nice example of indeed also my home country in the Netherlands is Dutch people don't eat enough vegetables. What Dutch people love is foreign dishes. So we have a whole meal kit range of foreign dishes, so world dishes it's called, and we provide the recipes. And by doing consumer research, we know that more than 80% of people follow that recipe. The people who buy that, they follow the recipe. Now, very simple, we have increased the vegetable content in all our recipes, and by that we can show that we have delivered in 1 year 23 million more servings of vegetables to Dutch consumers. So that's in a way, by knowing what people do and by implementing then a small change on a habit that they already have, you can make an impact. If you ask a consumer to do something completely different than what they do, then it becomes very difficult. That's our learning. So you understand the habits and build on that to nudge them to something healthier.
Thank you.
And yeah, clips work in that. Yes, of course. That yeah.
Thank you. We'll pick up one more question from the audience, and this is from Siti, asking both Dr. Saskia and Dr. Els about technological advances and perhaps the speed of it, and maybe in a sense, how can we leverage that to help create progress in the food sector that has been relatively a bit slower than digital technology. Maybe we'll start with Els and then go to Saskia.
How to match the, yeah, I think investment in technology is always there, but I look at it from different aspects. I mean, we have very much improving the nutritional quality of our, for that you need technologies. What we can do now, we couldn't do 10 years ago, to create great tasting products with less salt or less sugar. You need technologies for that. Also in the whole meat replacement arena, it's technology driven. But I also like the advances, to highlight the advances in digitizing technologies there, actually to make products much more accessible for mom and pop shops around the world. You know, so by building that skill of, we invest a lot in that. It has nothing to do with food but you know, having building the skills of the small shop owners to have inventories, to make them more bankable, let's say, through digital technology improvements. And I think that's an area that's really unlocking a lot in the accessibility of products.
Thank you. Dr. Saskia?
Yeah, maybe to pick up on that last point that Els made. As WSP, we're working also a lot with retailers in low and middle income countries to improve their supply chain, their store management. I also see a nice link with like the Sembako program, right? People with their e-voucher go to the e-voucher shop, But then the e-voucher shop should have the goods available, and the goods should be of good quality. You know, if somebody comes, they shouldn't be told, oh, come back in a few days when I've received my stock. And so it takes a lot of planning on the side of the retailer and building that capacity. And similarly, there was a program in Ethiopia with a fresh food voucher, and we found that the retailers, they mainly stocked as fresh fruits and vegetables, potatoes and onions, because they keep really well. But we wanted some more nutritious foods to be there, so then we invented with like a cooler box, not on electricity but really well insulated, so to help, you know, to help on that chain. So yeah, it's also about that part in the food supply chain.
I see Krista. Yes,
Yeah.
if you want to add.
If you allow me, I would want to have a response to the previous issue of school-based nutrition promotion programs. The government of Indonesia has a school health program for primary school children. And we are working with them on integrating nutrition education into that program, so that when children grow up, they already learn about healthy nutrition, healthy diets, and do not only need to wake up when they are adults, when they already have the problems. That is one. And the other is, the question was also about adolescents. The government is having a so-called healthy living community program, GERMAS. And in that context, propagates and nudges people with one plate, which Els mentioned. And there is another way of reaching adolescents with these messages through social and behavior change communication for nutrition and other healthy lifestyle issues through the smartphones, through web-based information. They are 10 hours a day on their smartphone. So this is now going through the government and their program, and we work with them on strengthening these components. I think we need to praise the government of Indonesia for having taken this up. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you, Krista. And Dr. Donna?
Yeah, thank you, Felipa. Hey, thank you, Dr. Krista Rader, for your suggestion, recommendation. Hopefully, our government will listen to your recommendation. Just like to you know, curious of listening to Els and Saskia. You know, how then? I'm thinking of how of course, I see the malnutrition issues of this triple burden here is really very related to the affordability. You know, of course, the knowledge on the nutritious food is as well the issues, but affordability for low-income country, for example, is the issue. And we are now, as a presidency of G20, we are thinking how to bring this issue then to I don't know how to bring the issues into the attention of the G20 countries, because, you know, for rich country, for them is alternatives are there available. They only need to have the awareness of the quality of food and nutritious food to avoid this kind of triple burden that we are talking about. But for Indonesia, for example, I know the poor people is they are fighting for stomach, like I said. Yeah, they only think of how their stomach be filled with food. They don't care about the quality of food. Of course, our government are doing, you know, try to do this, like what the Dr. Krista just mentioned. The government need to actually, this is the availability of the funding as well, to introduce the children with the nutritious food is actually also our concern. But because you know what, the issues is very related to the affordability of the society to this quality food. And very interesting when else the grown saying how Unilever now contribute to this health nutrient food. You know, your businesses, but you have concern, you have a heart to provide society with this healthy food. I don't know how then the G20 later on, how can we bring this to the attention that the G20 countries provide recommendation of whatever the kind of incentives to the incentives. I don't know what kind of incentives to the businesses to really also make contribution to this issue. Like CRS, for example. CRS is another issue, but this is really very serious issues to the next generation. I think we would like to see the all over the world, you know, reach the level of to some standard of welfare level. So I'm thinking in those lines. I mean, whether you can provide us any thoughts on how to ask to take attention of this all G20 countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Donna. And thank you so much for bringing us back to the G20, the platform that we're all organized in. And I think we can pick this up as the last question to Dr. Els and Dr. Saskia, and also use this as a closing remarks. Just bringing this back to the momentum of the G20, as well as all of the other engagement groups that are involved with us currently at the P20 and Business 20, Civil Society 20. How do you think then we can use this G20 momentum, or what would you recommend to the G20 leaders to drive solution-oriented actions to address the global nutrition challenges that we've been talking about? And I'll give it to Dr. Saskia for the closing remarks, and then Dr. Els.
Yeah, thank you. Very good question. Really, when we want to ask attention for nutrition and nutrition problems, it's good to emphasize the consequences. So it's the health burden, it's the developmental sort of setback, it's the GDP not realized because of that. Thinking of examples from specific countries where, like, the Prime Minister emphasizes nutrition because of the understanding that, like, the brain development of the child is not going well and it can't be regained 5 or 10 years later. It has to happen at a specific moment. And only when that is realized will the society, will the country develop and grow. This is typically the argument that gets their attention. And then you also need to be able to offer some good solutions. Where you really need to emphasize that it's across sectors that something needs to be done. It's not just the health sector, you know, it's the whole food system and the food system players, and it's also finance. So how do you allocate the fiscal resources of the government, and how do you enable consumers to also make better choices? So I would emphasize those points in that communique.
Thank you, Dr. Saskia. Els?
Yeah, what to add? Yeah, I fully agree. It is raising that awareness that investment in nutrition is investment in human capital. You know, it is investment in the future of your country and in the productivity and so. And indeed, that link must be made. It is not like, it must not be seen as a cost. You know, it's really an essential element. Then also emphasizing the education. I really like what Krista emphasized on. You can't start early enough by educating children on school on healthy eating practices and so forth. For governments also, but then, yeah, if they start to invest in this, it's really also about data, you know, knowing what the dietary status is and what the needs are, but also in doing effectiveness studies of programs, because what I see now a lot is, and what we face, of course, a lot is governments want, they tax products, they put front of pack labels on it and whatever, and effectiveness studies are lacking. So we never learn on how to improve in these programs. But it starts with the realization that an investment in nutrition is an investment in your population. So yeah, not easy to do, but
Absolutely. But we're starting somewhere, especially with this discussion. And thank you so much again to Dr. Els and Dr. Saskia for sharing your insights. And thank you for everyone for joining us today. It has been a pleasure to moderate such an interesting and insightful discussion, especially towards the end. And I think back about how we can link this to the G20 priorities of Indonesia of recover together and recover stronger, and making the connection that nutrition and healthy diets are that fundamental, essential to be able to actually recover then. And again, I apologize for not being able to pick all of the questions today. It has been such a rich discussion. I hope we can continue to play our roles in addressing these challenges and continue asking these questions in future discussions and events. And before I end the session, I would like to ask our audience to please fill our feedback form that is now available in the chat box. Your comments and feedback to our events will help us improve in our next CIPS events as well. And while you do that, once again, I would like to thank the World Food Program for supporting and co-hosting with us today. And I would like to thank Dr. Donna and Dr. Krista for providing an excellent opening remarks to set the context. I also want to thank Dr. Saskia Depi and Dr. Els de Groen for sharing your rich insights today. I'm Felipa and I've been your moderator today. Thank you, and I hope to see you again in future CIPS webinar. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Els and
Bye.
Saskia
Thank you.
and Dr. Krista.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Stay
Thank you,
healthy.
Felipa.
Thank you.
Stay
Bye-bye.
healthy.
Bye.
All the best.
Bye.